Good afternoon, ladies. Oh, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to our third episode of the Friday Property Clinic. My name is Tanya Fuchs, and as usual, I'm joined by Natasha Chumia over in Zambia. Hey, Tasha, how you doing?
Tanya, I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Great.
So we're up to our third episode of the Property Clinic, and in this episode, we're going to cover the story of I bought a piece of land. How come I don't have title deeds? So we've had a few people that have come to us and they haven't got their title deeds in place, and some people are concerned about it. Some people don't understand that they should have them. So we thought it would be a good idea to put together this episode based on that problem that people are having. So Natasha is going to discuss the various things that you need to understand as a result of having or not having your title deeds. And then we'll run through and have some questions. And then obviously, as per usual, we'll summarize everything in a slide deck, which we'll have available for you all to download afterwards. So Natasha, please go ahead and let us know why, if I don't have title deeds, is this an issue or not?
Okay, before I go straight into that answer, Tanya, I want to talk about the three different types of land tenure that we have in Zambia, because it's important to understand that first, and then that will inform why in certain situations people don't have title deeds. So just broadly speaking, we've got three different types of land tenure in Zambia. There's customary land, or otherwise known as traditional land. And then we have occupancy licenses, which fall under councils or local authorities. And then we have a certificate of title, which falls under the Ministry of Lands. So I'm going to talk about all three of those. All right, so customary land. As I mentioned, this is traditional land, and it falls under the chiefs, and it's fully recognized by the law, but there are no title deeds under customary or traditional land. There's no time limit on how long anyone can occupy this land, because it's usually passed on from generation to generation, or it's allocated and sold through the chiefs, through their headmen and women.
Okay, so Tasha, you said it doesn't have title deeds. So if there aren't any title deeds, how do I know who it's been allocated to?
The best thing is to go on the ground and do a physical inspection of that land. So you want to see, is that land being cultivated? That might give you an idea if it's being occupied by another owner or family. You want to check, are there any developments on that land? Have people started building on it? Very important, talk to the community. They'll be able to tell you who is occupying that land or who owns it, or if it is indeed available. So it's really important that you go on the ground, because there are no title deeds, as I pointed out. And even then, sometimes disputes might arise, especially over boundaries, because it's a customary land. Usually they use landmarks, that hill or that tree, those become the boundaries. Or a number of footsteps west, east, etc. So it's really important that you go on the ground and know exactly what it is that you're buying or what you're being allocated by your chief.
And I guess in reverse as well. So how do I guarantee that that land is mine?
Well, once you do have that customary land and you're sure that it's been properly allocated or sold to you, then you can, of course, apply for a certificate of title from Ministry of Lands. But it is a long process. You have to get the chief's consent, and then you have to go through the local council, and then you also have to go through Ministry of Lands. So it can be quite a long process, but it is doable. The other type of land tenure that I want to talk about is occupancy license. And this falls under a specific piece of legislation, which was recently overhauled, the Urban and Regional Planning Act of 2005. And this governs urban and regional planning. So occupancy licenses are usually for improvement areas under the council or the local authority.
What exactly is an improvement area?
An improvement area is an area which is designated as such by the council, and this is usually our high density areas. Some of our former townships were upgraded into improvement areas, and you will have an occupancy license for 30 years between the owner and the council. And it's important that the conditions of the license are kept. So for example, it'll state any fees that have to be paid by the owner, the use of that land as well. And those conditions need to be kept.
Okay, so just to go back on your point, how do I check if the person who sold me the land is the owner of the land?
Yeah, that's a really important point, Tanya. Now, I have to point out that with many of our councils, they are still using manual systems. So you would have to go to the council in question and tell them that you want to do a search, and then they will have to bring out the physical file for you to do a search on the physical file and see whose name appears in their file. And you know, depending on the council, it might take some time for them to retrieve the file. You may have to come back after a few days or a week. But you know, that's the best way that you can do it, as well as, of course, actually going to the property and doing that physical inspection. And the owner also can apply for a certificate of title. So the last one that the last type of land tenure that I want to talk about is a certificate of title, and this falls under the Ministry of Lands. It's governed by the Lands Act and the Lands and Registry Act. Now, under this type of land, it vests in the president on behalf of the people of Zambia, and it's called a leasehold because it's a lease between the owner and the president for a period of 99 years. Like I mentioned, with the occupancy license, even the conditions of the lease have to be kept. So you need to develop the land. Land is a productive resource. It has to be used. It has to be used for the intended purpose. So you need to check the zoning of that piece of land. Don't use it for residential if it's been leased, if it's been zoned, sorry, for commercial. And you also have to pay ground rent, like any landlord tenancy agreement. Now, the good thing with a certificate of title that falls under Ministry of Lands is that you can actually do a search immediately on the property. So you go to the Lands and Deeds Registry and they'll be able to give you a printout on that piece of land. And it has a lot of useful information. It'll confirm who the owner is, it'll confirm the size of the property, and if there are any encumbrances on that property.
Okay, so what happens if I do see an issue on that printout? What can I do about that?
Well, the best thing is really to seek legal advice because your lawyer will be able to tell you exactly what that entry means. So, for example, if there's a caveat, then you will not be able to deal with that property or finish your transaction at all until that caveat has been dealt with.
Okay, so I mean that's all the different types of titles or that exist. But so why do people sell the land without before they have deeds, for example?
I think there's so many reasons, Tanya. I think sometimes there's a reluctance for people to see through the process. You know, some of these processes can be quite long, as I pointed out. So, for example, if you're converting traditional land into estate land with title deeds, that's a long process. And sometimes people just can't see it through. Sometimes you might even find there's a death in the family. Maybe there's a death of the original owner. So then you have to deal with issues of mourning, of grieving, appointing an administrator who then takes over the process. So you may find that the person selling doesn't have title deeds because of that. In many of these processes, people just haven't finished going through that whole process of getting the title. Then there's also the bureaucracy. You know, these processes, they take time. You have to go through the public system, and they might not be as efficient as we would want them to be. So sometimes people find it difficult to just deal with the bureaucracy. Sometimes there are also financial constraints. You may find that people just don't have the money to finish it, to finish the process, you know, and there are fees that have to be paid. And sometimes it can get quite expensive if you're talking about hiring a surveyor to do the survey of the property, paying all the fees that have to be paid every step of the way. And so sometimes people hit a brick wall. This is really important because some of our friends in the diaspora will buy a property and it's got no title deeds, but they still buy. And then as time goes on, they become more and more anxious about it. And because the seller doesn't have the financial means to finish the process, the person who bought then takes over the process and they have to pay for the process to be finished. So you may even find yourself out of pocket. Another reason, Tanya, people sell because the people who are willing to buy. There are people out there who are willing to buy without title deeds. And unfortunately, many of our diaspora friends, when they come home to visit, they're in a time crunch. they're only here for maybe 2 weeks, maybe they're here for a month, and there's so many things that they have to do in a very short period of time. And so, they come across this property and they transact, they buy. Even though it doesn't have title deeds. So, for us at Diaspora Connect, our advice is always make sure that you use a professional, because then your interest can be protected, and they will make sure that you're buying a good property and that you can eventually get that certificate of title.
Okay. Well, I think that's quite, concise information. Should we just have a quick run through again through the bullet points, and then just quickly, if you can talk through the bullet points for me, Natasha, and then just to summarize everything that we've just discussed.
Okay, sure. So I think the main question is, I've bought a piece of property. Why don't I have title deeds? And it's really important in answering that question that you understand the 3 different types of land tenure that we have. And those are customary land, which is traditional land.
Just bear with me, Natasha. Let me just get this screen going. Sorry, a bit of technical issues here. Okay, now you can go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, all right. So shall I start from the beginning, Tanya?
Yeah, let's do it.
So the question is, I bought a piece of land. Why don't I have title deeds? And before we answer that, it's important to understand we've got 3 different types of land tenure. Customary land, which is traditional land that falls under the chiefs. We then have occupancy licenses, which falls under the council. And then we have certificates of title that fall under the states. So customary land, as I mentioned, this falls under the chiefs. It's traditional land, fully recognized by the law, but there are no title deeds. So it could be that people don't have title deeds because it falls under customary land. There's no time limit on how long someone can own a piece of traditional land, and it's usually passed on from generation to generation, or it can be allocated or sold through the chiefs and his or her headmen or women. The best way to know what piece of land you're getting, if it's customary land, is to actually go on the ground and do a physical inspection of that land, make sure it's not occupied or being developed or cultivated by anybody else, and make sure you really understand the boundaries of that piece of land. And of course, once you do have that land, you can apply for a certificate of title, but it is a very long process. We then have occupancy licenses. These fall under the local councils or local authorities, and this is for improvement areas. And you find that an occupancy license is for 30 years between the owner and the council. Very important that the conditions of the license must be kept. Any fees that have to be paid must be paid on time and regularly, and also the use of that property. If you want to confirm that the person you've bought from is indeed the owner, then you have to do a physical search at the council on the file, because the systems at our councils are still manual and not yet automated. And the owner can also apply for a certificate of title if they have an occupancy license. And then we have our certificates of title. These fall under Ministry of Lands, and they're governed through the Lands Act and the Lands and Registry Act. Under certificates of title, the land vests in the state through the president on behalf of the people of Zambia. And there we have what we call a lease. It's a leasehold. So it's a long lease of 99 years between the owner and the president, of course. And again, the conditions of the lease have to be kept. So you need to develop the property, you need to pay ground rent, and you need to also adhere to the use of that particular property. It might be commercial, residential, or agriculture. And then the good thing with a certificate of title under the Ministry of Lands is you can get a printout straight away from the Lands and Deeds Registry, which will confirm important information about the property. The owner, it will confirm if there are any negative entries against that property and the size of the property. So a lot of good information comes out of that printout, and you can get that straight away. Now, very often, people have bought a piece of land which doesn't have a certificate of title because with all these different processes, sometimes people are reluctant to see through the process. Maybe they're still undergoing the process of getting their title deeds. They're having difficulty navigating the bureaucracy. They may be facing financial constraints, so they can't afford to see through the process until they get their title deed. And also some of our diaspora friends are very anxious when they come here. They are keen to buy because time might be, very limited. So they'll buy a property which doesn't have title. But our advice at Diaspora Connect is always to use a professional. We're here to help you to make sure that you buy a property that is in good condition and your interest can be protected.
Thank you very much for that, Natasha. Okay, just stop this. Right. This is the joys of the technical side of this whole process. Okay. Well, I mean, I think that was a really good bit of background information for people to get a better understanding, in relation to the title deeds and why you would have or wouldn't have them. But overall, we're encouraging people to get title deeds where they can, aren't we, Natasha?
Yes. Yeah, we are.
Excellent. And obviously, we're also encouraging them to seek legal advice, because this was just a representation of some of the background information. But if they genuinely are encountering any issues, the best thing for them to do is to seek legal advice.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for watching. Just to remind you, if you'd like any more information, please be sure to contact us via our website, buyingpropertyinzambia.com. If you want to have a look at some of our previous episodes, you can have a look at that on our YouTube page. And if you want to see some of the other information that we post, some stories from our newsletters, you can have a look on our Facebook page, because we have quite a lot of information on there. If you have any questions, if you'd like us to answer any questions for you in any future episodes, please be sure to get in touch with us as well. But other than that, I just wanted to say thank you, Tasha, for joining me yet again.
Thank you, Tanya.
Excellent. And I'll speak to you next in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah. Great. Bye.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye. Goodbye, everybody.